Whole lot going on in the world right now.
Sure.
Why come to LA right now?
Well, first of all, we've wanted to come and check out what's actually going on the ground, show some support to the FBI agents, the National Guardsmen, and the Marines who have been here, I think, bringing peace to what was a very chaotic situation thanks to the leadership of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. If you really think about what's at stake here is the basic principle of, do we get to enforce federal immigration law when the people's duly elected president says we've got to enforce our borders? And I think obviously the answer is yes. And what you saw in Los Angeles was really, I think, a conspiracy of the mayor, the governor, and a lot of radical left protesters who are going to say, no, we're not going to let people enforce the immigration laws of the United States of America. We in the Trump administration had a different attitude towards that. Obviously, you've seen that immigration happen all over Southern California. I think we've now restored some order to Los Angeles, and thank God that we did, because I think absent President Trump's leadership, you would have seen the city really spiral out of control, which we don't want. I think it's a beautiful city. It's got a lot to offer, but you've got to be able to enforce immigration law.
So the riots have stopped. There's still protests, and there's still a lot of tension out there. It feels like something can explode at any moment. There's a lot of anti-ICE sentiment in LA. What's your metric for determining how long the military is going to be here in Los Angeles? Things are calm right now. Are you going to keep them here for a while in case there's more activity? When do you pull them out? Well,
I think what the president says, you got to do this case by case, right? See how this goes, see where we are in a few days, ensure that you don't have the increase in rioting activity. I mean, look, when these riots break out, people can't access basic services, stores get destroyed, people's economic life is destroyed, and of course if the riots really get out of control, you have people violently attacked. And that's of course what drove this initially, is you had FBI agents who were actually being attacked by a mob, and the Los Angeles Police Department, great people by the way, but they were being handcuffed by their political leadership from enforcing the law, saving our FBI agents, and preventing violence against federal law enforcement. So we're going to pull out the troops when we feel confident that level of instability is not going to return. But of course, when that happens and when the president makes that decision, of course, it's easy to put people back in if you feel like that rioting starts to ramp up again.
At the beginning of the administration, the idea was worse first, right? Targeting the worst of the worst criminals.
Sure.
You guys are still doing that, but we're also starting to see Home Depots getting hit, car washes, agriculture workers. Is the net widening? Because we hear, there's targets. They want 3,000 arrests a day. So are you guys widening the net in terms of who you're going after now?
Well, first of all, Bill, let's step back and appreciate just the radical success of the Trump administration. Simply through having a president who cared about border enforcement, we've gone from close to 3 million illegal border crossings per year to actually net negative illegal immigration in this country. In other words, we're deporting far more people than are coming in illegally into our country. That's exactly what should be happening. And that really all it required was a president who empowered federal law enforcement to do the job of enforcing our borders. So, yes, you're right. Now, what do we do? What the president has said is we really want to focus on the illegal immigrants who came during the Biden administration, but also we're enforcing everywhere. In other words, the president has said if you are an illegal immigrant into this country, you ought to voluntarily go back and come through the proper channels, because we don't want people who have come into the country illegally just staying here indefinitely. That's not the policy of the Trump administration. We've empowered law enforcement to really enforce the law. Yes, we're focusing on the most violent criminals. We're focusing on people who came here illegally over the Biden administration, but put simply, if you came into the country illegally, if you're not a legal resident of the United States of America, you ought to go back home and come through proper channels.
So basically, it's what Tom Homan has said repeatedly. If you're in the U.S. illegally, you're on the table.
If you're in the U.S. illegally, you are at risk of deportation, though obviously we're focusing law enforcement resources on the worst offenders, on violent criminals, and on people who came here recently. That's the main focus. And unfortunately, thanks to the Biden administration, there are millions upon millions of those individuals. We're going to try to enforce immigration laws primarily against them. But yeah, Tom Homan, the president, I'm going to say it right now, if you're in the country illegally, you are at risk of deportation, because you shouldn't be here if you're not consistent with the laws of our country.
So you're here in a big sanctuary city, Los Angeles. There's been a lot of resistance in sanctuary cities across the country, Boston, here in L.A. Activists, you've even got politicians interfering, some politicians getting arrested for interfering with ICE. Is there any world in which these activists and politicians throw enough sand in the gears for ICE and the Trump administration to where you guys slow down some of this enforcement? Karen Bass says ICE has to just flat out stop. Is there any world in that's a possibility?
No, that's ridiculous. But you are right that they're trying to throw sand in the gears of enforcement. That's what we see with a lot of these ridiculous court cases. The good news, Bill, is that you're starting to see that the courts start to side with the Trump administration on this very simple principle that the American people elected more border enforcement, and that's exactly what the president is trying to deliver. So I think that with the courts doing what they're doing, and you see us ramping up the deportation efforts, I really do think that you're seeing the enforcement against illegal immigration take a step forward, not a step backward, even though you're right, a lot of far-left politicians are trying to change the dynamic. Now, here's the thing, though, about those politicians is how crazy is it that we have a country where you have elected representatives of the American people who seem far more interested in illegal immigrants than they do the citizens of their own country? When Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass give Medicaid to illegal immigrants, let's be honest about what they're doing. They're literally taking medication and medical services away from poor Americans so that they can give it to illegal immigrants. Why would you want to do that? And why would we be surprised that when you do that, you have an illegal immigration problem on the scale of what they have in California? Immigration enforcement actually should work, states and the federal government working hand in hand. Gavin Newsom should be saying, we're not going to give free benefits to illegal aliens. We're going to give those benefits to American citizens. Meanwhile, us and the Trump administration are going to enforce immigration law. That symbiosis, that working together, I think will make the American people safer, and it'll make our country much better off. But look, if you're going to have politicians like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom who try to fight immigration enforcement, we're going to use every legal tool at our disposal to get illegal immigrants out of our country. That's what the president was elected to do, and he takes it very seriously.
Last question on this topic. If Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass see this interview, what's your message to them?
Our message to them is very simple. Just do your job. It is so simple to have a country where you do well by the American citizens, by the people who have the legal right to be here, and you enforce the law against people who have violated the law. I don't know why this is a controversial proposition. I don't know why Democrats and Republicans can't agree on it. Republicans under President Trump are very clear. We don't want to let people who are in our country illegally stay in our country. We want to enforce the border. We want to make it safe for American citizens to live good lives in their own community. Meanwhile, you have Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom who seem to want to do everything that they can to make it harder to enforce the law, to empower violent rioters to assault federal law enforcement officers. I mean, Bill, I guess my message to Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass is, why don't you empower the great people of the Los Angeles Police Department to put down some of these violent rioters rather than encouraging them? Why don't you tell illegal immigrants to comply with the law rather than encouraging radicals to assault our FBI agents who are trying to do their job? It's very simple. Support law enforcement. We think great things could happen for the state of California, but it's not going to happen if you have failed political leadership.
I do want to ask you about Iran. There have been all sorts of articles and media reporting about this supposed rift in MAGA world and amongst Republicans about what to do with Iran. How do you see things right now?
Look, what the president said is so perfect about this. I think he gets to define America first because he's the person who ran, who was elected, and who actually leads this movement. And for all of the online chatter, what I see, and I've seen it very privately, of course, and I've seen it very publicly, the president is very focused on a core American national interest. And that national interest is the state of Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We're pursuing everything that we can to make sure that happens. We're pursuing diplomatic channels. As you can see, we're supporting the Israelis as they engage in these military operations. We're shooting down Iranian missiles that are coming into Israel. We've been very clear we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And so for the folks I think who are frustrated with something about the president's policy, what I'd say is, do you think Iran should have a nuclear weapon? I think most people would say no. Has the president done anything other than use American influence and power to try to accomplish that goal? No, he hasn't. So support the president, recognize he's trying to do something that's very difficult, that other administrations failed to do, and that's end the Iranian nuclear program. I think he's going to do it, and he's going to do it by using clear, restrained, strong American leadership. That's what he was elected to do, and that's what he's going to do.
So how long do you give diplomacy a chance to work before it's time to drop a bunker buster?
Look, the president has to answer that question, right? And I think that what he said is he's going to pursue diplomacy until he thinks that there isn't an opportunity. And once he decides that diplomacy has completely run its course, that we're not going to get anything out of additional talks, then I think the president is going to do what he needs to do to end Iranian enrichment and end that Iranian nuclear program. Again, the president will make that final decision. I do think that we're running out of time, but as the president said yesterday, he wants to give it a little bit more time to see what diplomacy can accomplish. I think we're going to find out, and the Iranians are going to find out the hard way or the easy way. What I'd tell them sitting here right now, Friday afternoon, is please, for the love of God, recognize the President of the United States is very serious about this. He doesn't want you to get a nuclear weapon. He also is more than willing to work with the nation of Iran if it's willing to disarm peacefully. But if it's not willing to disarm peacefully, then we're going to have other options on the table for the President of the United States.
You said you think we're running out of time. The President says he wants to take about 2 weeks to think about it. Is that within your range?
Well, I think, as the president said, he's not going to tell anybody exactly when or what he's going to do. He's going to continue working this process. He's going to let the diplomatic process unfold. And in the meantime, of course, the president of the United States can do whatever he needs to do, whenever he needs to do it, to keep the American people safe. I think the president has a very clear sense of what he wants to accomplish and when he wants to accomplish it. But I'll let him to speak to that, because right now his administration has been instructed, do whatever you can to try to solve this problem peacefully, because if we're not going to solve it peacefully, we're going to solve it some way else.
I'm not sure if you heard the president's comments earlier today. He was asked about Tulsi Gabbard, DNI Tulsi Gabbard's comments that there hasn't been intelligence that Iran is close to a nuke. And President Trump said that Tulsi Gabbard is just, quote, wrong. Said she's wrong. There's been reporting that there's maybe a little bit of internal turmoil going on. Is that true?
Look, first of all, this rift, whether it's a public rift or a private rift, what I see every single day is, number one, a political movement that's united behind the president's leadership because he's doing great things for the American people, and an administration that is very much united, especially at the senior levels, with doing what President Trump has asked us to do. That's true of Tulsi Gabbard. That's true of everybody else in the administration and the president's national security team. I think the comments that you're referring to are, frankly, a creation of the media. Tulsi has been very consistent that what the president has said about the Iranian nuclear program is true, that they're getting too close, that they're enriching uranium far above the level that would be necessary for civilian uses. The president's been consistent about that. Tulsi Gabbard and every other member of the national security team has been very clear about that. What I see in some of these questions is the media will say, well, Tulsi Gabbard said this. Do you agree with this? And then when you actually look at what Tulsi Gabbard said, she didn't say what the media accuses her of saying. And I think that's true in this case. It's true of a lot of other situations where the media puts words in people's mouths. But trust me, Bill, we're all aligned here. We all agree with what the president is doing. And I think he's trying to lead America to a place where we don't have to worry about a crazy regime getting nuclear weapons. That's a very important place to go.
Last question, we'll let you run. Obviously, a lot of people in President Trump's ear giving him advice.
Sure.
Whether it's the military, his cabinet, you yourself. What advice are you giving him?
The advice that I'm giving him is, sir, trust your instincts. He's got the best instincts of any president I've ever seen, of any political leader that I've ever seen. I think that he knows when diplomacy has run its course, and he'll know when ultimately he has to employ the American military to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear program. But I think a lot of people, you're right, are trying to give him advice, but I think the president is incredibly focused on a very narrow thing. Iran can have a nuclear weapon, and he's going to use every tool at his disposal as President of the United States to ensure that doesn't happen. I think the president has got us on the right course. I'm certain he's going to make the right decisions for the American people, and I think we'll find that out soon enough.